On Sunday, right after I put my 2.5-year-old down for bed, I walked downstairs and turned the volume up on the baby monitor, which is an app on my phone connected through our Wi-Fi. I heard a voice coming from the baby monitor app and heard my toddler responding back. Since I had just turned the volume up on my phone, I only heard the tail end of the other voice followed by my toddler's response. My toddler was saying something about turning off the lights, which is part of their bedtime routine, using a very specific phrase that I used to talk about turning off the lights, which makes it seem like the other voice was using that specific phrase to my toddler. The voice might have sounded like a female, maybe even like me, but I was so taken aback I couldn't say for sure. My husband and I were the only ones home, and we both heard the voice and just looked at each other, and I just got chills and felt a pit in my stomach. Only my husband and I have accounts for the monitor and have the two-factor authentication enabled, so we would get notified if someone was trying to log in. We are both logged into our phones. There was no other devices in our room besides a sound machine and the camera, so no Alexa, etc. that gives off a voice. I spoke to the baby monitor app tech support team, and they checked our camera details and confirmed that the only devices logged in were ours, and that the microphone was not used at all that day, so no one was talking to my toddler through that, so it doesn't seem like it was a hacking. Monday early evening, around 6 p.m., I was in my office, which shares a wall with my toddler's room. I heard 2 distinct knocks on the wall, which were so loud I jumped. Then 2 more knocks followed maybe 30 seconds later. 1 minute later, the same thing. 2 knocks, then 2 knocks. Our toddler also keeps saying a word that sounds like cocky. When we were in her room on Tuesday morning, I asked, "Where's Oki?" And my toddler goes over to the toddler-sized chair in their room and says that he's right there, he's waiting for me, he's standing on the chair. I know toddlers have quite the imaginations, but I was spooked to say the least. Other than that, I haven't heard or noticed anything unusual, but I am completely on edge now, especially considering my toddler was involved. I've saged the whole house once and saged just my toddler's room again. Does this seem like a ghost or something paranormal, or am I out of my mind here? I've been dreading nighttime because I'm terrified something else is going to happen, and I don't know what we are potentially dealing with here. I would appreciate any advice or thoughts on all of this. You will pay for what you did. I heard a deep voice in Portuguese in my dream and woke up around 4 a.m. I was begging for forgiveness the moment I woke up, but then became conscious and would wonder what really or who really did I talk to. I always forget what I have dreamt of, but I remember that is the voice that always wakes me up, and I feel like it is a linked dream. They are always scary, always odd. Somehow there are lots of fights and arguments. "Oh, was the dream in color?" my friend asked me. I shook my head and answered, "Nah, I don't really remember. Do you dream continuous dreams like a continuation of a video?" I asked my friend. She was very into dreams. "Was the whole dream in Portuguese?" my friend asked. "Yes, maybe. I don't really remember. Are you going to read my dream?" I got very little details, I said, in a way trying to stop my friend from talking about my dream. "I feel that I can tell the meaning of a dream if you tell me more details." My friend fussed around, still trying to ask the details about my dream. Suddenly, I heard a voice from a distance. "Jemias." "What?" I responded naturally. My friend stood there and looked at a direction. I looked at the same direction and saw a shadow pass away. "Did the shadow speak?" I asked my friend. No. That just came out of you, right?" she replied. I did not understand what happened, so I ignored it and went about my day. I came back in the evening and asked what really happened at the moment when both of us saw the shadow. "Well, that shadow, I thought I saw it come out from your back," she answered, as if she was not so sure about it. "Do you know anything about that?" I asked. "Remember the trip we went last week to Nobaritsu?" she asked. "Yes, we went to a place called, in English, Hell Valley. That place is not really what it sounded like or haunted. It's just a volcanic area full of hot springs and minerals, sulfuric gases, and boiling hot water. Not too far away, we saw a dead animal. Not sure what that was, but it was helplessly dangling off a cliff. Why did I bring up this trip here? That's because my friend believes that animals could curse people when they are in spiritual form, a very Japanese thought. Yes, I remember at Hell's Valley, we saw a dead animal hanging off a cliff. Does the shadow you saw look similar? I asked, in a way trying to be both understanding and kind of skeptic. I think it's a bear. You know, a bear in Ainu culture is. She tries to tell me as if she is sure of what really happened. You'll need to be a little more scientific, see. I'm not trying to say that you are wrong, but we were not bear hunting, and it is not logical if the bear is going to be haunting or cursing me, I said, not letting her finish her sentence. Raiju, I know, but the shadow was huge, and it is not a person. I saw it come out from your backside. It was shocking. If that was not a bear, she said in a tone as if she was very heated up and stopped in the middle of her sentence. What happened? I asked. She pointed back because there was a shadow right behind me. I smiled and said to her, "It's Alishan playing under the lamp." We both laughed. From that day on, after the shadow went out, I did not dream of anything strange, and luckily nothing really bad had happened. I'm still kind of looking for the answer of what that shadow really is and what the dreams were really about. Do you consider this a spiritual experience? Does anyone have any thoughts on shadow people being living people from a different timeline? Possibly even yourself? Or am I crazy for thinking this? Here's my story of my shadow person throughout my life so far. I am interested to hear if anyone has any similar experiences or thoughts on shadow people. I've never thought much about a shadow person from my childhood, chalking it up to an overactive imagination or maybe just a trick of the life. At least, that is what I believed until the day it reappeared. As a child, the shadow figure would silently stand in the doorway of the spare bedroom, watching me as I lay in bed. I would stare back through my open bedroom door. It would only come at night, never moving or making a sound, just watching, but somehow it never felt threatening. For years, I slept with my door open, and every night it would be there, a quiet presence. Eventually, I grew older and began closing my door, making sure it could no longer watch me. By the time I was a teenager, I had convinced myself that it was just a figment of my imagination. Yet even as I outgrew my childhood fears, I still found myself closing the door to the spare room every night, as though some lingering part of me remained cautious. I never saw the shadow person again during those years. Then, in my early 20s, I came back home from uni for Christmas. Staying in my old bedroom like I often did, I awoke one night to find both my bedroom door and the spare room doors wide open, and there it was again. It was standing in the same spot, watching me, just as it had all those years ago. I stared at it, waiting for my eyes to adjust, for it to dissolve into the shadows, but it didn't. It stood there, clearly defined arms, legs, a head, but no face. I was an adult now, too old to believe in ghosts, but how could I explain this figure that had haunted my childhood, now appearing once more, just as vivid as before? Too frightened to get closer, I eventually crept out of bed, shut my door, and stayed awake for the rest of the night. The next day, I investigated with my family, determined to find a rational explanation. We looked for anything that could cast a human-shaped shadow in the doorway, but the light source from the street had changed since I was a child, as all the streets in the UK were updated at that time. There was nothing that could explain the shadow appearing now, let alone during my childhood. We waited until nightfall to see if the shadow would reappear, and I could find a rational explanation, but it never did. Years later, I stayed at my family's home again, this time with my partner. We slept in the spare room, the very room that had always frightened me. At first, I felt uneasy, but with my partner at my side, I pushed the fear aside. But after he left early for work, I found myself alone in the house for a week. One night, while walking to the bathroom, I noticed the door to my childhood bedroom was open. I had left it that way after clearing out some old things. I paused, staring into the room, right where I'd spent so many of my nights in fear. Something strange watched over me, a shift in energy I couldn't quite explain. I stood there, frozen, as memories of my younger self staring back into the spare room flooded my mind. That's when it hit me. I was standing in the exact same spot where the shadow person used to stand. looking into the same place it once had. Could it be that I had been staring at myself all along? Was I the shadow person, looking back through time at my own childhood? The thought was chilling, yet oddly comforting. All those years of fear, and perhaps I had been haunting myself. I recently had an odd experience, and I'm trying to determine whether it was paranormal or just weird. For context, my husband travels for work, and he often gets home very late. A few nights ago, I was waiting for him to get home around 11 p.m. While waiting, I decided to roll my trash cans to the road before the trash day the next morning. My driveway is a semicircle that goes behind my house. As I rolled my first can to the road, my husband pulled up in the opposite side and drove to the back of the house. While he locked up his work truck, I rolled the other can to the road. When I got to the end of the road, I noticed a shape that looked like a dog watching me. I turned and began to walk towards my house. My driveway is probably 40 yards from my door to the street. As I walked, I kept looking back to figure out what that shape was. About halfway down my driveway, a car drove by and the light shone on the shape, which appeared to be a large brown and white dog. We live in a rural area, so it is not unusual to see strays or runaways. I kept checking behind my shoulder as I walked to make sure it was not following me. When I got closer to the house, I called my husband over and asked if he saw the dog as well or if I was just hallucinating, as it was still standing in the same spot. My husband responded that he saw it and advised me not to stick around to find out what it was. At this time, we see the creature turn and look directly at us before appearing to charge. We quickly sprinted inside and locked the doors. We were never able to see the creature again. I asked my husband if he saw it in the yard when he pulled up, and he said no. Our yard is large, but it is clear, so if the creature was close enough to get to the road that quickly, my husband would have had to seen it. Additionally, my dogs have been out there recently and did not act as if anything was there. Is there anything paranormal that would fit in an experience like this? It just is very odd and doesn't sit right with me. My husband and I are still both shaken. Like I said, we live in a very rural area and do not scare easily by creepy crawls in the dark. What are your thoughts? I've randomly been thinking about this experience a lot and realized there's a whole community I can ask about it. For a little bit of background, this was at my family home when I was a teenager in rural Indiana. I had already had other insanely weird ghostly experiences at this house and property, and I am all into the weird and unknown. Although this experience usually gets me panicked anytime I think about it. I was walking my puppy, Apollo, by the wood line at night. We had a big yard, so obviously he had no leash on. This tree line was next to huge woods as well. It was pitch black, and I usually am paranoid in the dark, but I felt insanely weird that night. It really felt like something was watching me, like the physical reaction your body gets to it, like being stalked. I soon realized maybe I was more paranoid and started walking down the gravel road back home. We lived in an area where people would be caught hiding in the woods from the cops. It was a really methed out area, and I wasn't taking any chances. Well, I took only a couple of steps back when I heard this giant thunk sound. It legitimately sounded like someone had dropped a bag of bricks from up high. The sound came from inside the woods, and it sounded like it was parallel to me. I had my dog with me, so I was going to yell, "He fucking bites!" assuming it could have been another guy on the run, but before I could say anything, this tall, I believe 7-foot figure comes out of the tree line. It had a sickly pale, white skin, and was completely starved. I could see its bones poking out of the cloth it wore around its waist. It had a human-like body, with human hands and feet, but lanky limbs, and an abnormally wide chest. The face was genuinely the worst and most confusing part. Imagine a deer skull, but without antlers. It was kinda like that, but much wider and flatter on the front-facing part. No indentations or nostrils either. It was just flat and smooth. Although unlike a skull, it was covered in the same sickly pale skin. It had 2 sets of eyes, and it looked to have no mouth. It wore some wooden headgear I couldn't take time to comprehend. No ears, but had short, tangled, dark hair on the back of its head. The look I exchanged with this creature was short, but it still haunts me. The most insane part to me is that it looked terrified of me as well. looked surprised and even froze in place as we just looked at each other. It didn't reach out to me, it just looked at me. Its eyes were pitch black like an animal's eye. Really, it was like a deer in headlights. My dog, being smart, immediately ran and waited for me at the front of our porch until I snapped out of it and ran too. I can't say I blame the little dude for leaving me either. At least he waited. I looked back while running and saw the figure fade back into the woods. Fast forward a week later and I started getting knocking and scratching at my bedroom window every single damn night. My window was up high to at least 8 feet from the ground. This went on for a week until I asked my friend who lived next to me to go outside and tell me what they saw. While I was on the phone with them, hearing the scratching against my window, they said they saw nothing. They thought I was the one scratching, and I fucking wish I was. This went on for months, and I had awful nightmares all while it happened. Eventually, they stopped and my dreams became less horrible. I wonder, was this a Wendigo? I didn't think they would be afraid of humans, or look like that. Is it something entirely different? Please Reddit, I've been sitting on this for years. Tell me what you think. Back in 2020, I was living in rural South Dakota. During the pandemic, I started to go on night walks around the small town just to get out of the house. On these walks, I would put earbuds in and listen to music as I walked. I rarely came across anyone out at the same time other than a teenager who was sometimes out skateboarding. I was going on these walks 2 or 3 times per week for a couple of months without any issues. Then, one night, something happened that I still can't explain. There were few roads without any streetlights. However, I turned the corner onto a residential road with lights. As I walked along, I noticed the streetlight was out on the block ahead of me, but I didn't pay attention to it. As I walked along, I noticed what appeared to be a girl walking towards me. I thought it was odd given it was probably 11 or 12 p.m., but I'm a pretty big guy, so I try not to seem creepy or intimidating. I avoided eye contact and got off the sidewalk so she could pass without me being too close to her. All I noticed of the girl was that she seemed to be blonde and in a white nightgown or dress. As she passed me, I said hello, but I had earbuds in so I wasn't sure if she responded. The only odd thing I noticed as she passed was the strong scent of perfume. I assumed maybe she was coming back from a meetup or a date. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary to me until I went about 5 or 6 steps past her. Right at that time, the streetlights came back on suddenly. It startled me and made me freeze for a moment. I sort of instinctively turned around, but there was nobody there. I scanned the road and yards. I also took out my earbuds to listen. I saw and heard nothing. We were way too far from the next intersection for her to have quickly turned to another road, but we were too close to each other for her to go into any house quickly. It completely freaked me out, and I beelined it back to my place. I never went on another walk at night. I still have a hard time processing this, as I am a very skeptical person.